There seems to be a considerable amount of misunderstanding about Mary, the Theotokos, the one who bore God in the flesh. In the first place, when the angel comes to Mary, he says, rejoice full of grace. Rejoice, one full of grace. And we understand that she's been chosen out of all ages and all generations for this special ministry to humanity. She's the one who's chosen for complete submission, complete acceptance, and complete belief and piety. So God has chosen her for the special ministry to humanity, for the incarnation of the living God, the God, the Word. We'll have to speak a little bit about that also later. The understanding of Mary has been there's been an imbalance in Christianity. Because in the Latin West, they perhaps had a misunderstanding and an over-veneration of Mary. And because they went to an extreme in their understanding of the ministry of the Virgin, when the Protestant Reformation started, it was one of the things that Protestants could see it was in excess in the Roman Church. So it's one of the things they began to reject, not disrespect in the beginning, but reject this excess veneration of the Virgin. And it grew completely in a way that Martin Luther would have been dismayed about. But it grew to a point where in some Protestant circles, there's almost a hatred of the Virgin. It's almost a denigration of the Virgin. And when we denigrate Mary, we also denigrate her ministry to mankind. And we also denigrate the fullness of Jesus Christ. So when she is filled with divine grace so she can carry out this special ministry, she becomes filled with grace in a way that she begins to fulfill the doctrine of what we call theosis. Now, theosis is the transformation of the individual Christian. The call of all of us, by the way, we're all called to participate in the things of God, not the essence of God, participate in the divine, not essence, but participate in the immortality of God through grace. We're all called to be participants in the nature of God. But Jesus Christ identifies the nature of God as love, or love above all comprehension of love, all understanding of love. But Mary surrenders herself totally to the service of God, and therefore this ministry to humanity. And so she's filled with divine grace. She can bear in herself that quality of love that's necessary for her to fulfill this ministry, this quality of love, not only for God, but for humanity itself. So when we stop to think about the nature of Jesus Christ, there's a reason why the divine nature took on the human nature and combined the two in himself. Because we're alienated from God. And the beginning of our redemption is to be redeemed from the alienation between God and man. And in Jesus Christ, this reconciliation has taken place. The divine nature has brought back to itself, back to communion with itself, the human nature. So that's major aspect of our redemption, is to be redeemed from the alienation between God and man. And Jesus Christ took on the human nature, as we all take on the human nature, being born in the womb of the Virgin. Now, if you stop to think it reasonably, if Jesus Christ, if God dwelt in the womb of the Virgin and took on our human nature through the Virgin, it means he took his flesh and his blood from the Virgin. And her womb contained the living God, God the Word. Therefore, it is the ark of the new covenant. Just as the old covenant contained the vessel of manna, the heavenly bread, the rod that budded like a living tree, and the tables of the law. In Mary's womb, the giver of the law was there, not just stone tablets tracing the law. The rod that budded from the root of Jesse, the living tree, the tree of life, Jesus Christ himself. That rod is placed in the Old Testament covenant. And here, the living rod, but it's like a living tree, is contained. And in the vessel of manna, but in the Virgin's womb, the true bread of heaven, the true heavenly bread dwelt bodily. So to denigrate that womb by any means, to denigrate the person who was chosen by God out of all ages and generations to fulfill this ministry to mankind for the incarnation of God and taking on the human nature, to reconcile the human nature that had been alienated from the divine nature. That reconciliation, that redemption, we find in and through Christ Jesus. The idea that that we could imagine a sort of a degradation of the person who carried that ministry to us. We could exalt the prophets, venerate the prophets, reverence the prophets, or the apostles. None of them bore a ministry even vaguely equal to the ministry of the Theotokos, the Mother of God, the Holy Virgin. And so to regard her in that context as the one who was chosen to perform this greatest ministry necessary for the redemption of mankind, to reunite the human nature with the divine nature in her womb, tells us that we have to be very careful about how we regard the Virgin, and that we not try to lower her status or denigrate her in any way, but to venerate her, and at least as we venerate the apostles, at least to the degree that we venerate the prophets. But she's higher than all mankind, because the prophets spoke about the divinity, spoke sometimes about God becoming man for our redemption. The apostles proclaimed it, but it was fulfilled in the womb of the Virgin Mary. She was the Christ bearer, the one who bore this great, wondrous ministry of the redemption of mankind from his alienation from God.